Well, AI is transforming behavioral healthcare. There's just no question about it. And we can look at this from several angles. It's an endless list of the ways in which AI is transforming behavioral healthcare.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Brewer, welcoming you to this edition of M.E.S.H. M.E.S.H is the place where your mental, emotional, and social health is always on the agenda. And I'm really excited to bring to you a very special guest today, Dr. Frederic Reamer. Dr. Reamer has served as a social worker in mental health, legal, and correctional settings across the country. Dr. Reamer is quite well known for his work with ethics, and today we're going to be talking about the existence and the ethics associated with the use of AI, artificial intelligence, in the provision of mental health services. Dr. Reamer, you know that I could go for the next 40 minutes giving your background, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Dr. Reamer, let's start with one of the myths, I think, about AI, artificial intelligence. A lot of people think that AI has been around like for minutes, but you're saying that's actually not true at all.
It's not true at all. In fact, the term AI, artificial intelligence, was coined in 1955. That's decades ago. A well known Stanford University professor by the name of John McCarthy coined the term. But it's only in recent years that artificial intelligence has found its way into the behavioral health, mental health field. So that's why, for many folks, it seems like a relatively new phenomenon. And of course, the way it's being used now is relatively new. Lots of innovations that were not around in the 1950s, but the concept itself has been around since the 1950s.
So let's talk about the impact of artificial intelligence on the provision of mental health services. As you said, there are lots of different ways in which it's
Hmm.
for clinicians. There's one way to look at it, but for clients, I'm not sure that clients are as fully aware of some of the perhaps maybe good news, maybe less good news when it
Hmm.
comes to the use of AI. What would you like for clients to think about when it comes to AI and mental health services?
Yeah, well, there's a lot for them to think about. And I just want to clarify, yes, clients are using AI in increasing numbers, but also people who are not clients, just members of the general public, who are using AI to help them cope with life's challenges. And they're doing it in several different ways. So, for example, you may have a client or a member of the general public who's having a crisis in the middle of the night. It's 2:37 a.m. They just ended a very significant relationship, perhaps having a panic attack. A client's therapist is not available. A member of the general public may not have a therapist. And some people are using AI to try to help them cope with this intense challenge. And they're doing that in a couple of different ways. One is some people, whether clients or members of the general public, are using what we call public facing AI platforms that are available to anyone who has a computer, internet connection. And I imagine many listeners are familiar with some of the most popular ones, ChatGPT, which of course almost everybody's heard of these days.
Yeah.
But there are
Yes.
other ones that are very prominent, and a lot of people are using them. Perplexity, Copilot, Gemini, Poe. Poe is not Edgar Allan Poe. That's the platform for online exploration. There's DeepSeek. There's Grok. There's a French company that started one recently called Le Chat. There are lots of them that members of the general public and clients can use. They are free at their most basic level if you don't upgrade. And then there's a second way in which clients and some members of the general public are using AI, and they are using AI platforms designed explicitly for therapeutic purposes, psychotherapy, counseling, behavioral health, whatever term you prefer to use. And there are lots and lots of these platforms out there. They have their fans and supporters. They also have their critics. So, as with most things, I think it's a mixed bag with regard to the potential benefits and the potential risks.
Let me ask you this. You just rattled off a list of platforms, some
Hmm.
of which I'm going to guess some people have yet to hear about.
Hmm.
Is Is there such a thing as a more legitimate, I'll put that word in quotes,
Mhm,
platform versus less legitimate in terms of seeking
mhm.
services? How does
Yeah.
the public know what's
Mhm.
a better one to go to, if there is a better one to go to?
Yeah, so I do think, to use your term, I do think there are some reputable, legitimate AI platforms designed by not only the computer experts and software experts, but also by behavioral health professionals. So a lot of the platforms that are out there, and I could rattle off the names of these commercial products. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to endorse particular products, but I can tell you, I could rattle off the names of about 15 different AI platforms where
Wow.
behavioral health professionals have been involved in the design and the testing. And I think they're reputable. I think they're legitimate. They are dotting the I's and crossing the T's with regard to legal requirements. For example, they are HIPAA compliant in the United States. They're HIPAA compliant. Other countries have different versions of what we call HIPAA. In the United States, they have what are called business associate agreements, and they've consulted with lawyers to be sure they're doing this correctly. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything they're doing is effective, that it meets clients and other users' interests. I think some of them do a very good job of assessing clinical risk, providing users with resources, some advice, and every coin I know has two sides. So I have also seen some significant problems with that. But let me just also add quickly that many clients and members of the general public don't even know about these platforms designed specifically for behavioral health or
Right.
so-called psychotherapeutic purposes. They're using the more general public-facing platforms that are not designed for behavioral health. So they may be getting information, they may be getting advice, they may be getting recommendations that don't align with best practices in the behavioral health world. And that makes me very nervous.
So how does someone get that information? I don't have, let's say I don't have a therapist. I have no idea what I'm doing,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
I've broken up with somebody.
Yeah.
I feel like I might even hurt myself. Do
Mhm.
I go to ChatGPT? Where do I go? And I'm not asking you to
So
name names, but
yeah,
what do I do?
yeah, yeah. So my advice, my opinion is that, the average person would not be well served by going to the generic AI platforms such as ChatGPT, Gemini Copilot, Perplexity, Poe, Greek, DeepSeek, Grok, and so forth. And I'm not denigrating those, but they're not designed for behavioral health purposes. What I would do if I were eager to find an AI platform that's reputable, that's HIPAA compliant, again, for people in the US, I would be doing a search for AI platforms that are designed for behavioral health, that meet legal requirements. And people can find those by, ironically, using artificial intelligence to do that search. Now, a lot of people are just going to do the old Google search or what we call the DuckDuckGo search. By the way, that's an actual search engine, or Bing or one of those, and they're going to find them, right? But they could also use ChatGPT, Perplexity Copilot. They could use artificial intelligence to find links to artificial intelligence platforms that are designed specifically for behavioral health purposes.
Let's say that I am starting with my therapist, with a new therapist.
Mhm.
Should I assume that my therapist is using AI? And if so, what does that actually mean? Can I say to my therapist, I don't want you to use AI? What are my
Abso-
choices?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the client is in the driver's seat. So if a client, let me give you a practical example.
Perfect.
So an increasing percentage of clinicians want to save time when it comes to documenting clinical encounters. Because the reality is, spending a lot of time writing clinical notes in the chart, it's not fun. It's time consuming. If you're in private practice, it's uncompensated time. And there are many, and I mean many, reputable AI platforms designed specifically for documentation purposes. But the way this works is the clinician has to inform the client that the clinician is interested in using an AI platform to generate a summary of the clinical encounter. You have to get the client's consent. So not only is it okay for the client to ask, are you using AI during this session? The clinician is obligated to tell the client and to get the client's consent. Now,
So,
the reality is, in most cases, clients are consenting, but some of them are not comfortable with this because it does generate a recording, and the recording is uploaded to the AI platform, and the AI platform generates the clinical notes, which I should add quickly are generally quite good. And I am finding also some significant problems with the AI generated notes.
so if my clinician is using AI, that means that the AI is running in the background of our meeting. It's
Mhm.
hearing everything that we're discussing, and it
Correct.
is then generating a summary of what we have discussed. What happens to that recording?
Well, it is stored in the cloud, so to speak, and I'm not talking about the white fluffy cloud floating over your house. I'm talking about, in computer land, that kind of cloud. And the cloud stores that recording, and so that cloud is operated by the AI platform, the AI company. Now, it's generally encrypted, and they don't have personnel who can like listen in. I mean, I do think they have controls in place typically
Mhm.
to protect the privacy and the confidentiality of that information. And those notes generated by the AI platform can be subpoenaed. So I get involved
Huh.
as what lawyers call an expert witness in lots of lawsuits, lots of licensing board cases. And now those AI generated notes that were stored in the cloud, the proverbial cloud, they can be subpoenaed. Now, the clinician doesn't necessarily control that storage, but the company might get the subpoena.
Okay. So from my perspective, I'm supposed to be able to say whatever I want to say in my
Correct.
therapy session. But if
Correct.
it's being stored in the cloud and somebody can subpoena my
Hmm.
conversation, where
Hmm.
are my protections? What's happening to my privacy?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And the simple answer is the clinician is responsible for entering into an agreement only with those AI companies that have safeguards in place to prevent easy access by anybody to that recording, to those notes. However, if there's litigation involving that client,
Mhm.
it could be a child custody dispute. It
Yes.
could be a lawsuit that the client's involved in, a criminal court proceeding. And I see this a lot where the lawyer on the other side of the case can subpoena those records. And the clinician is obligated to notify the client that the AI generated notes, the recording have been subpoenaed. If the client does not consent to the disclosure, which they may not want to do, I understand that, the clinician is obligated ethically and by law to challenge that subpoena, what we call a motion to quash or a motion for a protective order. And the other side is probably going to fight that motion to quash, that motion for a protective order. It could very well end up before a judge, and a judge has the authority, and this is well established, a judge has the authority to decide. It's a 4-point test, which I'm not going to take the time to go into, but it's a 4-point test
Mhm.
based on what are generally called the Wigmore criteria that a judge can use to decide whether to honor the client's privacy regarding that AI generated recording and those notes, or whether to order the disclosure of all or a portion of those notes because of their relevance to the legal proceeding. It's a balancing test.
So it sounds a little unnerving, quite
Mhm.
frankly, uh,
Mhm, mhm.
and for on both sides, for the
Yes.
clinician as
Mhm.
well as for the client.
Correct.
For those listening who want to get more information about how to determine what sites are better or less good, if you will, than others, where do they go?
So there isn't like a master list. And by the way, um, what if I were to mention specific products today, by tomorrow they may change. These things come, these things go. I mean, it's a very fluid landscape or webscape. So there is no master list. There is no centralized source for all of this. It requires doing a lot of research, doing a deep dive. There are some, I think, reputable sources out there that provide guidance with regard to best practices. I've written about this in some of my own work. Others have written about this. Recently, fairly recently, the state of Utah created an Office of Artificial Intelligence Policy, and to
Interesting.
their credit, they have disseminated, written and disseminated a really good guide. And I was involved in that as a consultant. They've generated a really good guide regarding best practices in behavioral health, in the mental health world, with regard to um, reputable AI resources and tools, questionable AI resources and tools. There are other organizations that are doing similar sorts of things. Internationally, UNESCO, for example, has a fabulous website
Interesting.
that provides guideposts for people to think about in terms of the potential advantages of these AI tools, the potential disadvantages, risks. There's an awful lot out there, but it takes time to do this research. And I wish there were a like one-stop shopping
Yes.
location, but there isn't. There isn't.
Just one more very quick question. If I, as a potential client,
Mhm.
discover that my clinician uses AI, is it a reasonable question to ask before I begin work with that therapist? Do you use an AI platform? Do you not? And then base my decision about whether or not to proceed with that clinician based on whether or not they use that
I
uh,
mean,
platform.
absolutely, it's appropriate,
Okay.
legitimate to ask. However, I just want to repeat, I believe the clinician should not wait for that question. The clinician is
Right.
obligated to
Yes.
explain the ways in which the clinician is using AI. And people who are using AI, as I said at the very beginning of our conversation, clinicians are using AI in a variety of ways, not
Yeah.
just for documentation purposes, risk assessments, supervision. They need to disclose this ahead of time. And also, I will add, I think a responsible clinician should be asking every client whether the client is using AI to get support and help so they can talk about the potential
Excellent.
benefits and risks. That's a change in the consent to treat protocol that I think a lot of clinicians have yet to make.
And I think that's such an important point. Could talk to you forever. How do people get more information about you and the enormous stack of books and articles that you have written about ethics, including AI?
Yeah. So the easy way is, everybody's favorite, the Google search, that kind of thing. That's easy. However, if you want a more granular, nuanced set of information, use artificial intelligence. Use one of those platforms. Put my name in or anybody's name in, but you have to give it the right kind of prompt. That's the term we use, a prompt.
Okay.
I would like a list of the books and articles on artificial intelligence written by Frederic Reamer and contact information, whatever you want. And believe me, those platforms, they're going to give you a very detailed response.
All right.
Oh, which by the way, I should add, is not always accurate. It's most of it's accurate. I'll tell you just quickly, it's pretty funny. Somebody told me they did that and they got lots of information about my work and also the fact, according to AI, that I got my PhD from Harvard University. That's not true. I don't know where AI got that. I got it from the University of Chicago. My point is, you've got to be careful. Fact check,
Excellent
fact
point.
check, fact check. Most of it's accurate, some of it's not. We call those false narratives or hallucinations.
Or both.
Yeah,
Thank you
right.
so much, Dr. Reamer, for joining us today on this edition of Mesh. I absolutely appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All righty. And folks, thank you for joining me on this edition of Mesh. You've learned a lot. I know I have. Please subscribe to the Mesh YouTube channel. You will have access to all of the interviews that we've done, and please share them with someone you care about. I'll be here next week. I hope you are as well. Take care.